The Electric State might be the worst adaptation of its source material that I've ever seen, and I watched both seasons of the Halo show. Joe and Anthony Russo took a very small, atmospheric, and beautiful graphic novel written and illustrated by Simon Stalenhag and turned it into a $320 million cinematic equivalent of Bowling for Soup's 1985. Now, generally, I'm fine changing things when you're taking a book to the screen because it's inevitable. Not everything's going to translate. But in this case, it seems like they didn't really understand the source material at all, and so just took the pretty pictures and used it to tell their own story.
We just looked at the images. The story is very opaque. It's kind of hard to understand it.
Well, that's encouraging. The Electric State book is a haunting tale of humanity destroying itself through greed and technology. In an alternate version of the 1970s to 1990s, a corporation invents neurocasters for the army to pilot giant robots, which are then used in a large-scale civil war that decimates the country. Many years later, the corporation pushes these neurocasters on the population, but accidentally creates a hive mind that causes addiction and slowly kills the users. Meanwhile, we're introduced to Michelle and her brother Skip, children growing up in the aftermath of the war. Michelle's mom is addicted to drugs and eventually dies, and her brother is taken away by social services. Michelle then grows up in numerous households, goes to boot camp, and watches her first girlfriend die due to neurocaster addiction. Years later, a robot comes to help her traverse the vast landscape to rescue her brother. It's the feel-good story of the year. It's kind of like Cormac McCarthy's The Road, but with robots. So naturally, the movie is a buddy cop action comedy that reminds you how much you loved Radio Shack.
Radio Shack.
Always nearby with values that please.
A lot of what we do has to do with nostalgia, inspiring to make an Amblin type film or a...
But in the movie, which I watched on a VR headset for dramatic irony, the human civil war from the book is completely erased and replaced by a war against robots who were invented by Walt Disney? I guess when Pirates of the Caribbean breaks down, the pirates really do eat the tourists.
We just looked at the images.
Anyways, these robots eventually demand equal rights and are led by Mr. Peanut in a full-scale war, before eventually signing a peace treaty with Bill Clinton. The story of the neurocasters, Michelle and her brother remains, but they are completely sanitized. Michelle's parents die in a car crash, and her romantic interests and sexuality are completely unexplored. Which is a shame because her girlfriend dying was one of the most emotional scenes of the book. And to top it all off, now she's joined by Chris Pratt, who's playing Chris Pratt. He even admitted in interviews that he played the same character. But this time he kind of looks like Brian Fantana. 14% of the time it works every time.
And using his incredible artwork as inspiration to figure out what kind of story we could tell.
For a great example of this, here are images from the third act of the book where Michelle rescues her brother. And here's the movie. Look how they massacred my boy.
This is hopefully as big as it gets.
But why? If you're going to bid the rights for a small atmospheric graphic novel, why did you turn it into a $300 million action blockbuster? It's like a plot to light $320 million on fire and then pay a bunch of people to give it positive reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. Seriously, look at every positive review for this movie in the audience reviews. All of them have only reviewed one movie. If you're going to completely throw out the story in favor of your own, why would you adapt it in the first place?
It's a real passion project.
Passion for what? Big Mouth Billy Bass?
We drew everything from the 90s that we could.
In the final film, it doesn't feel like passion for the source material at all. Instead, it feels like passion for Back to the Future.
You know, an Amblin style.
Make an Amblin type film or
Back to the Future.
and talk about Back to the Future or Zemeckis. Actually, it is very Zemeckis in tone.
Quite a coincidence.
Yeah.
Let's just call it what it is. It's the Russos hijacking this source material to make a modern-day Back to the Future. Except instead of the 50s this time, it's the 1990s.
The 1990s?
90s.
1990s, 90s, 90s, 90s,
90s.
90s.
That's right, the dream of the 90s is alive in this movie with MTV, Radio Shack, Sears, Big Mouth Billy Bass, Super Nintendo, and we even end the movie on a piano cover of Wonderwall. Chris Pratt even mentions that they're making Back to the Future in the panel and then looks at Anthony Russo like they're all geniuses.
It's as far back as the 50s was when they did Back to the Future. Back to the Future. Back to the Future. Back to the Future.
Quite a coincidence.
Yeah.
But now that we've established that this is not really an adaptation whatsoever, at least we can judge the movie on its own merits, right? Maybe the Russos had something really interesting to say. Unfortunately, this is not really the case.
I was moved to tears reading it. When you get to see the movie, you'll see.
The end result is just a mismatch of tropes from other better movies like I, Robot, E.T., and of course, Back to the Future. I do find it kind of funny that the Russos looked at a movie about a greedy CEO that ruins everything And the Spielberg movie they chose to channel was E.T. It's not like Spielberg has another very famous movie about this exact situation. Oh wait! And very predictably, the ending message is, the robots are just as human as the humans. You mean the guys with an AI movie studio are defending the robots? Oh my gosh, I'm so shocked! The internet is predictably ragging on Millie Bobby Brown for this movie, but I contend that she really didn't have much to work with. The character is given no personality traits other than she loves her brother, and as we mentioned, everything remotely interesting from the book was discarded. She has a line in the film's closing monologue that says, "After the war, things really sucked." And it's hard to blame an actor with a script like that. The rest of the cast is fine, but it feels like they were all typecast to play the most generic characters on the planet. Stanley Tucci gives it his all as mustache-twirling CEO. Giancarlo Esposito plays literally the exact same role that he just played in Captain America, and as mentioned, Chris Pratt plays Star-Lord again. Visually, the movie is not ugly, but it's nothing really to write home about other than the exact shot-for-shot remakes of the art from the original graphic novel, which are predictably great. It's like the Russos viewed the book as concept art and not as a story.
And using his incredible artwork as inspiration to figure out what kind of story we could tell.
Ultimately, I just don't understand the approach. If the goal was to make a more generic, big blockbuster to get people out to the theaters to make money off of it, then I could kinda understand it, but this is a Netflix movie. It's not making any money at the box office whatsoever. It's not like Netflix doesn't fund original projects. Their top 4 movies of all time are all original screenplays. I would argue that 99% of the people watching this don't even know that The Electric State is a graphic novel at all. What are you gaining from the brand recognition if none of the fans who like the book will like the movie? If the Russos made a completely original story about a human war with robots starring Chris Pratt and Millie Bobby Brown that was unrelated to The Electric State at all, I bet you the same number of people would watch the movie. We spent $320 million on The Electric State, when we could have spent $30 million on The Electric State. To play us out, I'll leave you with Corey, naming all of the different things we could have funded instead of this movie.
2 Interstellars, 10 Poor Things, 18 Novocaines, 6.5 Nosferatus, 3.2 John Wick Chapter 4s, almost 1 entire Avengers Endgame, 32 Brutalists, 3.25 Oppenheimers, 53 Anoras, 17 The Substances, and 1.5 Dune Part 2s.